Kenny's just as well. Yeah. Kenny's just messaged as well to say that he may join us in about 10 minutes or so, so he'll just chip in.
All right, fantastic. Yes, so we just kind of play it by ear, right? It would be lovely if Kenny could join us. Yes, welcome everyone to our talk today. I think it's always a little bit tricky to kind of introduce people in these talks, because normally the people introduce themselves much better than I can. I think, Mazda, I don't know if that's wrong or right, like half a year ago, we met online. Basically, I went to a similar event that was just kind of, I think it was just advertised on LinkedIn. And I thought at the time, oh, this is so interesting. This is a conversation I would love to bring to my students, to our students. And so this is kind of how it started. You probably will, introduce yourself and tell us your story. And Natasha, the same. I think Natasha I've not met yet. Excited to hear that. And yes, we would just kind of try to keep it within an hour. But I would just pass it over to you guys and enjoy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andreas. I should warn everyone, my propensity to go over the allotted time is the stuff of legends, but I'll try my best to keep it brief. But really exciting to be here with you all, and thank you, Andreas, for organising and inviting us to come and speak. So yes, my name is Mazda Beghi. I'm a clinical psychologist, and my colleague Kenny will hopefully be joining us shortly. He was expected that maybe he won't be able to make it at all, but I think his afternoon clinic has ended early, so he'll join in at some stage. But I'm very pleased to say that my colleague Natasha Ramzan is also with us. She's a trainee clinical psychologist. So hopefully today you'll get a range of perspectives from clinicians from minority ethnic backgrounds who have qualified and are experienced working within the NHS independently, and also Natasha, who has just very recently been through the application process and is in training. So hopefully there'll be a nice sort of blend of information for you to be able to harness from today. So I'll hand over to Natasha, who will tell you a little bit about herself and her background, and then I'll do a bit for myself as well.
Thank you, Mazda. And thank you, Andreas, again for giving this opportunity. So my name is Natasha, and I am a second-year trainee at King's College, IOPPN, and a trainee clinical psychologist, and doing my placement currently in the older adult at Maudsley Hospital. I wanted to start off with this quote, which really resonates with my experience and my journey of becoming a clinical psychologist. So fear and self-doubt have always been the greatest enemies of human potential, by Brian Tracy. And I think that fear and self-doubt always kind of stopped me from achieving what I wanted to achieve. And then it was like, what is stopping me from the things that I want to do? And I am an international trainee as well. So I took a big risk of moving to another country, different culture. I'm initially from Canada and my background is Pakistani. So just moving across the pond and just getting into new culture, new healthcare system. So it was a lot, but I took that risk to achieve the goal that I wanted to achieve. In terms of my journey, so I did my undergrad in psychology at York University in Canada. And then I did my master's in clinical social work, which I specialized in mental health, and that was at University of Toronto. And then I worked in an outpatient setting. So I worked in the eating disorder clinic, borderline personality clinic, and adolescents, children and adolescent outpatient clinic that was also in Canada. So after working for 4 years, and then I applied for a doctorate program here at King's College and got interviewed, and now I'm here. It's unfortunate that I'm here during the pandemic, so couldn't really enjoy the British culture or traveling. But yes, I think that when I think about psychology, it always kind of reminds me that it's very white dominated, and what are some, and even during my studies in my master's program, I always question my supervisor, is there a lack of diversity in terms of the clientele, and also diversity in the profession as well? And there were some gaps in services and gaps in accessing those services as well. And then those were the things that really kind of motivated me and made me more passionate about psychology. And then also some cultural stigma that's attached to mental health within the South Asian culture, that also made me more kind of passionate and kind of on a mission that, okay, I'm going to try to work towards work towards my goal, and spread that awareness within the culture to address the stigma, but also to make the services more accessible, and also address the systemic barriers as well when people from the minority are not able to access these services. So I think one of the things that I would really highly encourage you guys to do is just focus on your goals. Find a mentor who can guide you and support you with your journey, and don't shy away from bringing your authenticity and cultural values and beliefs that make you stand out. I think sometimes we shy away from our culture, we shy away from the values and beliefs that we hold, and sometimes that can be really a huge strength in terms of your application, in terms of your experiences, what you bring to this profession. So again, never shy away from any opportunities. Always try to take risk, and you'll never lose, because you'll always learn from your experiences.
Lovely, thank you, Natasha. So I'll fill everyone in a little bit about myself. So hopefully my colleague will join as well very soon. But so I also, like Natasha is at the moment, I trained at the IOP at King's College, London. However, I've had a slightly unorthodox journey and route to qualification. I guess my background is in psychology, undergraduate, and I completed a PhD in psychology as well in Queen's Square, which is more sort of neuroscience based, looking at effects of surgery and medications in movement disorder groups like Parkinson's disease and Tourette's. And at that stage, I actually had a bit of a career change. I decided if I was ever going to experience something else, that would be the time. So I actually went into the civil service, and I worked in asylum policy and operations for a good 2.5-3 years or so. And while I was there, I kind of came to the realization that actually the clinical aspects of work is more appealing sort of things to me. So I went back and completed my training. And I think one of the things that really struck me when I went back into clinical work and to do training was the lack of diversity across the board with supervisors and with people who I was learning from and working with. And I guess the gravity of that really hits home, particularly when you work in an area like London, and we're based in southeast London, around the Denmark Hill, Lewisham, sort of Southwark boroughs, where you walk outside and you look around, and there are people from lots of different nationalities and all sorts of kinds. But then you go into the workplace and so the lecture hall, and with other psychologists are largely white British individuals. So where was the diversity there? Where's the representation of these kind of things? So this was part of the inspiration for Kenny and I to set up our own clinic, which is the big into clinical psychology, and a lot of the work that we do is to advocate for people from minority ethnic backgrounds to enter into the profession. And the idea behind these networking opportunities and things is to provide individuals, young aspiring clinical psychologists, to develop networks and know who to reach out to. And I think this is something that's becoming quite clear now within the profession, is that for people from minority and ethnic backgrounds, those networks are not very well established and not clear. So gaining experience or insight, or just having someone to speak to before writing applications or preparing for applications is harder. So that's part of what we're really doing today, and it's something that I'll speak about as I go along. Is the importance of being able to reach out to people and being bold and being able to know who might be able to support you. And that's something that Natasha and I will discuss as we go along. And I've added this quote. I do my best to try and be as provocative as I can. The limitation now being that Andreas is recording me, so I'm going to have to try and be on my best behavior, which might make it a little bit less fun, but I'll do my best. But my quote here is, unlike many people I come across, I do believe in regrets, and I've never been able to understand how one can live without feelings, that there's something we could do or we could have done better. And I guess what I'm really coming from here, and again, what I'll try to speak about a bit more of as we go along, is when I look back at my experiences and things that I've done, the things I regret the most, I guess, and the things that I want to change the most are those opportunities that I didn't take. And I guess where I'm coming from there is just that it's not the failures that we need to be worried about. And I think this is something that's very common, particularly as Natasha and I were discussing before, is it's one thing to fail. There seems to be an additional burden as someone from a minority ethnic group, that if you fail as someone from a minority ethnic group, that blow is a little bit harder. But essentially my view has always been that the things I've learned the most from are the failures. The interviews I've learned most from are the ones that went spectacularly wrong and didn't work. I don't regret those. I only regret that not going better. But there will be lots of opportunities that come up in the course of your careers. And it surprises me how often people pass up opportunities because they feel they aren't ready, or they feel that they need more time. There's no such thing as being ready. There's no such thing as having more time. There can always be more time in that sense. It's paradoxical. But I think of something that I'll talk about throughout is knowing when to take risks and knowing when to make yourself vulnerable and putting yourself in situations where you're a little bit outside of your comfort zone, because there will be lots of opportunities that come up. And I think that's something that we need to develop, particularly from minority ethnic groups, is when those opportunities come up, we need to be able to identify them and exploit them. And if it doesn't go right and we sort of fail and it doesn't work out the way we want to do, that's okay, because we go again. But for me, certainly, the things I regret are those opportunities that I passed up on for whatever reason. Okay. Super. So I think Natasha, so we're going to think a little bit about some practical aspects as well about the application process. So Natasha is going to talk to us about some numbers here.
Thanks, Mazda. So we're looking at statistics from 2020 in terms of applications. So there were about 4,225 applications through the clearinghouse, and then 770 got accepted, so which is 18% of the application. So we don't have the breakdown of in terms of how many of those students were ethnic minority, but this is the overall number. So it's quite a competitive program, and at the same time, again, don't let that scare you away, because I always say, if I can make it, I'm sure you guys can make it as well. If Mazda can make it, we can all make it. So yeah, these are just numbers for 2020.
So should I move on? Yes, that's lovely. So we're going to go through some generic skills to engage everyone and prompt everyone, and you'll find we'll constantly coming back to the minority ethnic background and how it's particularly relevant there. But a lot of this will apply to all prospective candidates and applicants. And when preparing, and we appreciate at this stage of your career, this may seem like it's quite far away, and it is a fairly long route to qualifications, to become a chartered qualified clinical psychologist. You do need to have the endurance for it. It does take at least an undergraduate degree. Most people, by and large, by far the majority of individuals on training have at least a postgraduate, a master's, or even PhD before applying. And and the guidance is at least 1 or 2 years of clinically relevant experience. So you may still be some way off being prepared to apply, or maybe some of you won't be. But in doing so, from now, it's really important to start applying some of these skills and start to try and achieve or obtain some of these skills. And one of the things we've got here is it's learning from examples. So as I was saying earlier, networking. Do you know the individuals to contact who might be able to support you? And if not, which may very well be the case, it probably surely wouldn't be the case for most of you that you know anyone, but how can you go about achieving that now? Are there people you can contact? And this is related to the theme of being quite bold, of challenging yourself and taking risks. It's about contacting people. There's a secret that I like to tell people about when I come to talks, which is that all of these papers and journals that you read, the names that are there and the email addresses, there are real people behind those names, and there are real people behind those email addresses. And most of us check our emails. And if you send an email to one of these individuals, you may just get a response from them. It does happen, and it can happen. When I was an undergraduate, I contacted at some stage, because I was looking for clinical placements, and I must have sent something like 50 emails to clinical psychologists who I found on the BPS website, a list of chartered clinical psychologists, and the ones who are foolish enough to leave their email addresses on their listings. I thought like were fair games. I started sending emails to all these people. Out of the 50, maybe 3 or 4 got back to me. 2 or 3 of them were just to tell me to go away. One of them agreed to meet me, and because of that, I actually ended up working in Queen Square. Because of that, I ended up having someone to supervise me and write for applications to do a PhD. You only need the one person, but you need to reach out. You need to reach out to lots of people, and don't feel worried about not getting responses, and not feel worried if someone does send you a bit of a snooty response back. It unfortunately can happen. It shouldn't, but every now and then it does. But it's important not to let those little setbacks deter you from reaching out to other people and being quite bold in that sense. So reach out to individuals. That will help you in terms of networking and having someone who can support you or advise you throughout the application process, and how to pick up things. Interpersonal skills are really, so as I say, people are busy, so there are people behind those computers and email addresses, but they're busy, and it's going to take a while for them to get back to you. Some people won't get back to you at all, but it's really surprising how sometimes people can come across quite disrespectful, and I'm sure in a lot of cases people don't mean it, but it's just a perception. So always think about the perception that you're giving when you're speaking to people. No matter what stage, I guess, of training or qualification I've always been, one thing that always centers everyone always comments on, I'm not sure if they still do it at the IOP, Natasha, is there's always someone who starts lecturing you about work attire, what's appropriate work attire. And you know, it's just very, very basic things like that we need to consider, and it can make a difference. There's a reason why I'm sitting here and speaking to you with a shirt on. It's perception, it's what's professional, it's what's appropriate. You can't see the bottom half of my body. If you could, you'd realize I'm wearing a tracksuit bottom. You can't see that. It's perception. What is it that people are going to be able to identify? What is it they're going to be able to see from you? Because that is going to make a difference as well. Presentation skills. So presenting your ideas succinctly. So if you're contacting individuals, have an idea regarding what it is you wish to achieve from that communication. What is your goal? What do you want to convey? What do you wish to achieve as a result of it? If it's that you're trying to arrange a meeting, make that clear in what you're requesting or what you're sending. The worst thing someone can say is no, or they don't have time. Well, okay, fine, that's all right. There's lots of people out there that you can contact, but have some sort of goal, have some sort of vision of what it is that you're hoping to achieve when you contact individuals, and do what works. So try to home in on your skills. There are things that I can do really well. There are things that I'm not so great at. So I focus on my skills. I focus on the things that I feel comfortable with, and that's what I try to and try to build on and bring to the table when I'm networking or when I'm at work. So think about what it is that you're really good at. I mean, when you're having conversations with friends or family, or when you're doing things, what do you excel at? Are you better at writing emails? Are you better communicating in person? Focus on that and harness that. If you're better communicating via email, then great, send lots of emails back and forward and use that. If you're better face-to-face, then try to arrange that face-to-face setup. It's a lot easier now, oddly enough, to meet people, well, I say face-to-face, but virtually. And it's quite easy to set that up, but it's a very similar dynamic. You see each other, you speak to each other, you react to each other immediately. Natasha, anything that do you feel like I've missed there, or anything there that you feel is particularly important to add?
No, I think you covered everything, and just want to echo that try not to get discouraged when you are networking. If you don't hear back, I remember this undergraduate professor that I've worked with. I tried 3 times every year. I kept trying, and she finally took me as a thesis student, and which helped me to get into my graduate school then because of that research experience. So try not to get discouraged if you're not hearing back, and you can always follow up, because they're busy people, and they might have missed your email, and I'm sure that they might follow up with you again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks, Natasha. Yeah. So these are some things that you can start to apply now and start to think about now. Let's start to think about some of the potentially more long-term considerations, and what we were referring to earlier about rejections and being bold and my regrets not necessarily being the occasions where things haven't gone well, but the times where I haven't where I haven't put myself forward, or I haven't taken opportunities that are presented themselves. And it's really, this idea is really, really important. Consider what's happening around you and what the opportunities are. Are you putting yourself in positions where opportunities can occur? Are you shying away from those situations? Because that's going to make a huge impact. A lot of what I've been able to achieve, I guess a lot of positions I've had, or even my PhD funding or clinical experience, is because I've created opportunities. There are lots of people that are very, very good at job applications. I hate it. I hate that whole process of writing applications and then going to interview, and I get horrifically nervous, and I'm sitting there and I'm shaking and I'm trembling and I'm just rambling on like I am now. But I'm better at creating opportunities because I put myself in positions, and I feel like my work can speak for itself. So if I'm in those positions, people see what I'm doing, they see what I'm delivering, and opportunities can be created for you in that sense. So don't think that you need to wait for positions to become available. You can create positions. There are possibilities for that depending on the systems and networks that you're working in. But experiences of rejection are really, really important as well, and how we respond to that is critical. And for myself, I applied twice to the trainings. The first time I didn't get on, and I had some really poor experiences of interviewing that could have easily deterred me. And part of that was, well, what I was saying earlier was I wasn't prepared, because I didn't have anyone to support me through those early years and those initial processes in order to gain experiences, but also in order to know what sort of things to look out for. And if I were to go back, I guess one of the elements that I did on the plane, and speaking to lots of clinical trainees, but also assistant psychologists and people who are aspiring to apply for the doctorate, something that comes up quite often is whether we need to downplay or trivialize in some way our culture and our ethnicity. And it's really shocking how many people, how many prospective, aspiring psychologists feel that they need to underplay their culture. And my message constantly to everyone, if you are from a minority ethnic group, if you are from another nationality, if you are diverse in some way, and there are lots of ways in which we can be diverse, that is potentially going to be actually your main strength. It's about knowing how to harness that. There are lots of opportunities that I've had, and there are lots of things that I'm doing. I'll come to one project later on, even hopefully if Kenny has joined us by then, where the success that I've achieved has been almost entirely dependent on my ethnicity. It's the fact that I was Iranian, that I'm a Farsi speaker, that I'm not white British, that placed me in an ideal situation to take on that role or take on that project. And in clinical training now, it's becoming more and more important for the profession to have people from diverse communities involved. And if you're writing an application, people won't see your name because the applications are anonymous. They won't see your face, and they won't know who you are. You could be anyone, you could be from any nationality, unless you've studied abroad or your education was abroad, then they'll see potentially where your university was. But otherwise, it's really difficult to tell. Unless you bring that forward in your statement in some way or another, people won't be aware of your diversity and your skill set, and that really speaks for itself. So it's really, really important to bring that forward and emphasize it. And my experience of rejection, or one of the experiences essentially, was probably because I didn't state that enough. And in some cases when I was going to, and by doing that, essentially all I was doing was minimizing my strengths. So if you are from a diverse group, think about how that makes you unique and how that makes you different, because that's the main thing with these application processes. Is everyone who applies is going to have lots and lots of really, really good experience. What will make you stand out are your own personal reflections, and culture is brilliant, an ideal concept to reflect on and bring that through.
Mazda, can I ask a difficult question? One, and Natasha, same to you. So, because it's inevitable if you go through that process, right, that at some point you will be rejected. You will apply, even if it's just like you're out of, you do your bachelor degree and you apply for assistant psychologist. There's a good chance that you will start off with some rejections. And one thing I think the last time we talked about, where you had an experience where I felt like, from listening to it, I felt like, okay, there was kind of borderline racist how do people react to you, and they rejected you in that interview situation. And then I was thinking, okay, as a person that wants to grow, it's really important that I kind of think, okay, what was my fault and what was their fault? I don't know how to put it better, right? But it's kind of like, okay, there's a rejection. How can I do better? But at times there's also where I have to kind of, I think it's important to say, look, it was not my fault. It is, they treated me not right. And so I'm kind of thinking like, how do you separate these two? Like, I don't know how to, but like, right? Like if you get a rejection, how can you like parcel out what's your own fault? How can you grow? How can you, right? And like, not, I don't know, like, what do you think? I would love to hear your opinions on that.
Yeah, I think Andreas is referring to something I spoke about in one of the webinars Kenny and I hosted a while ago, which was an experience of interviewing at a particular university where they'd arranged a role play, and the role play was the client is from I think like an Indian background, and so when I heard about this, I immediately thought, okay, well, this is going to work really well for me because I can bring some of my cultural perspectives and things like that, and my awareness of minority ethnic groups and things like that into the role play, and it just turned into a complete and utter train wreck. And the immediate impression was, God, I'm really not ready, and I'm really not good at this, and maybe I need to consider something different, and it really affected me for some time. And what stood out to me was the response of the individuals who were doing the role play with me, who were the academic staff members, who just didn't respond very well, or didn't respond how I expected, and it almost started turning quite hostile. And it's easy under those circumstances to introspect and put the blame always on yourself. And it wasn't for a while that after reflecting on it, I realized, okay, well, those people were all white British individuals, and they were in a city, as a university centre that was white British population, and they probably didn't really have many clients who were from that background, and maybe didn't even know many people from that sort of background. And once I started to rephrase the interpretation, I guess, of that situation, or to reassess the interpretation, I came more to the conclusion that it was more an idea of what was going on from the other side, what they were projecting back onto me. That was an issue, and the only way to respond to that is really to try not to allow it to affect you, to try not to doubt yourself, to try to consider the alternative interpretations of what those experiences may mean and where it comes from. Because it took me a while. It took several years later before I thought back on it and hang on a second, they were white British people, so why would they be in a good place to tell me if something is appropriate culturally or not, if something is applicable culturally or not? And the more I thought about it, the more I realized actually I was right in the sort of things that I was saying, or the judgments I'm having. I feel like I had a better perspective than they did. And this is really important for all of you to know as well, is that if you are from someone who's coming from a minority ethnic background, I can tell you my experience of working with very, very skilled, very, very experienced white British clinicians is that you are probably far more culturally aware, culturally sensitive than they are. Far more, because you have lived experience of it. Natasha, did you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, no, I think Andreas, that's a very important question, because it's reality. When we get rejection, the first automatic response is that, what did I do wrong? And what I could have done better. And I think it's also important to realize that maybe from students from ethnic minority, to acknowledge that, yes, there is systemic racism. When I was doing my master's at University of Toronto, when I looked around during my orientation, there were only 4 students that were from ethnic minority. And then again, in my current program, we're only 4 ethnic minority students. So what does that say about the system as well, in terms of within the education system, if there is racism when it comes to selection or admission process? So yes, I think it's good to take accountability in terms of what you can work on, but also acknowledging that, okay, how much of it is our fault or what we can work on, but how much of it is that the system needs to change as well.
Yeah, and we're 40 minutes in, and thank you, Natasha's been sporting enough to bring racism into the conversation, and again, it's so easy to shy away from this and to not want to discuss some of these things, but it's there. So what are we meant to do? It's there. So what are we meant to do? Are we meant to not talk about it? Are we meant to not point to it or identify it or say that it's there? And why not? And psychologists are in some ways the worst people to talk about these things, because we're trained to be very, very reflective and attuned to what it is that we're experiencing at certain times. And my own personal experience of talking about racism, institutional racism, things that I've observed in the profession with groups of people who includes lots of white British individuals, is that an alarming number of times someone who is white begins to cry in that group or throughout that conversation. When I and others start to talk about the racism and discrimination that we've experienced or seen, that reality, the expression of that reality, appears to be so threatening to some people who are from white perhaps European, British backgrounds, that it becomes overwhelming. And then when that happens, all of the attention gets deflected onto that individual and actually trying to comfort them. That's the fascinating aspect of that, is that I'm telling you about someone calling me the P word, or well, am I allowed to use that word, Andreas? Because this is another
university grown-up conversation. Yes, please.
Another thing that, because experiences I've had, I'm in the middle of explaining to someone that I've been called a Paki, I then get reprimanded for using an offensive word. I mean, well, what the hell is what the hell is that? If I'm experiencing these things, other people should bloody well sit and listen if it's relevant and it's important. So why do we need to minimize that or mitigate that just because it's going to make other people feel really, really uncomfortable about what's going on? And these are the issues within the profession. We need more people from diverse communities to be able to reflect this and to be able to model this really to our colleagues and counterparts. And we've really come to this section here, I guess, as reflecting on your life experiences and bringing out what is unique about you. And culture and diversity are really, really important things. So in your application process, constantly think about how are you different. So remember, you're not different because you've had 1 year experience working in an IAP service, or because you had 1 year experience working in a research setting, because just about everyone who's applying will have some sort of experience. It's your reflections on what that experience means that's really, really important. And reflection is something that you might hear a lot of, and it's a concept that many students find very, very difficult to grasp or grapple with. But your reflection is your own internal experience of whatever it is you've been doing. So your professional experience is working in a service or working with a client. Your reflection is what thoughts came to you at that time. What was your impression at that time? What was it? How did it change you? These are the reflections. I worked with this individual and I learned certain things. That's my reflection, is that I learned that actually I need to apply things in a different way. It's your own personal internal experience of that work or being in that place, which is your reflection. And that's unique to you. That's very, very specific, because our reflections are going to be very different.
Matza and Natasha, could you maybe give us some like almost practical tips on how to self-reflect? Because I think that's like, it's such an abstract term. I think this is one thing in a lot of employability events, we come back how important it is. And I can see it in the applications I see, where I feel like you have amazing experiences, but I don't see any reflection on them. You basically just list them. But how do I do that? I always say, okay, see conversations and write, but is there something where it's like, because I think at the time you might feel like it's not worthwhile writing anything down, or I don't know, how did you develop your self-reflection? Or maybe, something you learned now that you can give our students as almost like a practical thing to do.
Yeah. Natasha, do you want to take that?
Sure, yeah. Self-reflection is a skill. I think it's an ongoing skill that we build upon. And for me, reflection is thinking about certain experiences. What did I learn from it? What are some obstacles, or what are some things that I learned about myself during those experiences? How did these experiences make me feel? What are my views about these experiences? So it's basically in terms of connecting with your values, connecting with the thought process and the beliefs that you hold, and how those can help you with the experiences that you're going through, and just learning about yourself as a person, and your strengths and weaknesses and things that you can improve on, rather than just listing in terms of.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Natasha. I can see my colleague Kenny is fashionably late, but he's with us now. Kenny, we're talking about reflections. And any tips you might have for people who are with us about we enhance that, or how I guess the question is really how do we demonstrate a reflection?
Yeah, thank you, Master. Hello, everyone. My apologies for being late. It's just finished a clinic. Yeah, in terms of reflection, I think fundamentally it is about meaning making. So, and that's actually what psychologists do a lot in therapy. So in life with different situations, or people might call events or stimulus. And these are the things that when we approach it, we start to make meanings from it. So even just now you're listening to me, you're looking at the video, you're making some meanings from it. So at a superficial level, you could say that what I did today is to watch a video. So you can certainly list things like this, but the difficulties is that because people make different meanings out of different things, and the way we make meanings are directly linked to our values and our cultural upbringing, and also some of our tendency to think in certain ways. So by showing people what kind of meanings you make from a certain kind of events is the idea, is actually the way to show people who you are. And you're actually giving people a sense of some through the meaning you make from of a particular event. People will be able to make sense of who you are, what you're passionate about, what you're fearful of. And another thing, it's really about so when we're also doing reflection, it's also helpful to do it kind of in a by adopting a growth mindset. So rather than reflecting with a fixed mindset, saying that, oh, I've done this task and I feel inadequate, or I feel I don't have the skills. So these are quite a closed mindset thinking style. It doesn't lead you to anywhere. It only leads you to feelings of feeling miserable or feeling limited or not good enough. So when we are reflecting, we're constantly carrying a growth mindset by thinking about what we have done, what we can learn from this experience. How could I then think about, and gradually when you're reflecting, it's not just about the meaning you make, but also maybe that leads to some really committed actions. Like if I, through interacting with maybe people from a certain group, I realize that there's so much more to learn about maybe the policy, their history, and therefore the committed action I would take is by maybe reading something or joining some events to get to know people. So you can say that it's always about finding an event, which is usually about your job experience, and then you make some meanings from it, and then trying to say about, like, talk about how you would transform these kind of meanings into actions. And it's not just about actions in terms of personal development. It could also be about how you would like to build the interactions with other people in the professional network.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, culture and diversity are a great way of bringing through quite novel reflections. Because again, we've got this sort of slide here that just indicates how challenging it is for people from minority ethnic groups to get onto training. But and what that reflects is just that lots and lots of people applying are white British. I mean, this is the UK. The majority of people are white British, so fair enough, lots of people there. But what it means is that potentially the reflective space that's present in the applications is quite marginalized and limited to what the experiences that particular population are likely to have. As people from minority ethnic groups, we have experiences that are by and large very, very different to other people. So our reflections, if we are able to bring those through, are going to be very, very novel and interesting and different as a result of that. So harnessing again here your ethnicity and your cultural background, your diversity, is a really, really powerful way of delivering an effective reflection that's going to make you stand out during the application process. So I'm just going to go through that slide again, because we don't have a great deal more to go before a sort of a question and answer, but one that we wanted to emphasize is, because it's really important, is leadership. And this is a concept and a theme that comes up very, very often now in training. What separates in many ways the training in clinical psychology to training in other therapeutic disciplines. And I think what we're referring to here is the fact that when writing applications, you don't just have to think about your experience of working with people who have a mental health disorders. What core centers are also looking for are leadership skills. So we are now in a position where in clinical psychology and training in general, when you reach senior positions, the more you move up the ladder, the less time you have working with clients, the more time you're going to have in policy and management and those kind of roles. And that's how to excel and achieve within the NHS. It's the people who have lots and lots of client-facing hours are really the ground troops of the profession. If you want to be really, really successful within clinical work, I mean, you can have your own private practice like Kenny and I are doing, and that's our way of maintaining lots of contact with clients and being able to do draw therapy. Our future in the NHS is in management. They want us to be running services, to be developing services, to be creating services. That's where you can make change. So if you have experiences regarding leadership, when things that you've done, like you've been head of a society or a group, or you've run a society at the university, or you're doing other things that are like that, that's really, really relevant as well, actually, in doing your applications. And those leadership skills are going to be really, really critical for how successful you are in your profession. And again, this is about taking opportunities, being bold, stepping outside your comfort zone, risking failure. And Kenny and I have a very recent anecdote that we'll share with you. But I'm interested in, Natasha, what has been your experience of leadership, and how has that developed during your training so far?
I think at King's PPN, they very much focus on leadership. And then in our last year, there's a project on leadership as well. And then third year training is quite focused on leadership. So like Mazda said, I think one of the things that differentiates us from other therapeutic disciplines is the leadership skill. So I think if that's something that you can start to focus on and try to look for those opportunities that will help you to develop these skills, will be really, really helpful and beneficial for your application.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Kenny, did you want to talk about our recent experience, so a little anecdote from us, because I think it's really relevant to this topic, and it combines leadership, ethnicity, and all these things. So our experience with Hestia, do you want to say something about that, or shall I?
Maybe you can give people a bit of a context, and I can
sure.
give additional information.
So this incorporates what we're talking about. Really is that. So as we're saying, Kenny and I have opened up our practice. We both have a strong interest and a passion working with minority ethnic groups, and that's really the ethos of our clinic. And I have a strong background working with refugees and asylum seekers. Kenny is doing some stuff as well. He's got an interest and a background as well working with refugees in the UK. It's something that we've been really interested in developing and thinking more about. And it's an area that, because of our diverse backgrounds, because of our ethnicities, we can really lend a lot to as people who speak different languages and also have that cultural awareness and sensitivity. So it makes us stand out within a crowd of European white clinicians. So in any case, we were contacted about a couple of months ago by a charity who worked with asylum seekers, and essentially they had this Iranian asylum seeker and who they'd been able to get funding for to have some therapy. So they contacted us, and because this individual needed a Farsi-speaking therapist. So someone at that one found me and contacted me and said, "Okay, we've got this chap. We've got funding for X sessions. Do you mind to work with him?" And Kenny and I thought, yeah, this is great. What a wonderful opportunity. Now, again, based on my experience of what I've seen of individuals, what makes other people stand out, and this, you might be sitting there, okay, well, this is your story as a qualified clinical psychologist, but the process is exactly the same no matter what stage of your career you're at. Most people, I'm pretty confident, and anyone challenge me on this, you're more than welcome to. Most people, I feel, clinicians, very experienced clinicians, would have seen an opportunity like that and thought, oh, lovely, that's great, let's work with this client. The leadership, the being bold, the being stepping outside your comfort zone, the idea of risking failure propels you to do something else. So when we had this opportunity, and again, as I say, I'm really quite sure most people would have just taken it and moved on and thought, great. Kenny and I essentially thinking about leadership, thinking about this future, thinking about upscaling, immediately thought to ourselves, this might be an opportunity. So we didn't just go back to these guys and say, yes, great, we'll take this person on. We said, yes, we went back to them and said, yes, it's great, we'll take this person on. But also, by the way, I have experience of working in the Home Office. I've worked with Helen Bamber Foundation. My colleague Kenny works with refugees, where I speak Farsi, he speaks Cantonese. We have these languages. We'd actually be really interested to meet with you guys and see whether you have more clients that we can take on. And by doing that, by reaching out in this way, they could have got back to us and said, well, no, or they could have just totally ignored that email. As it so happened, it started to get escalated, and we started communicating with other divisions and layers within the organization as emails were being passed on from person to person. And eventually we got through to one of the managing directors, who arranged a meeting for us, or suggested, let's meet in a couple of weeks. So we thought, great, maybe there's an opportunity to do more work with these guys. A couple of weeks later, we still hadn't heard from them. Now, again, other people may have thought, okay, we pushed it, we should leave it, they're not interested. Following the same thing, be bold, step outside the comfort zone, don't be afraid of rejection or failure. We emailed them again to say, listen, we're still really interested, what's going on? Eventually, we got a meeting from them. We met with these guys yesterday. And as it turns out, we've now been able to broker an arrangement where we're potentially going to have a huge source of referrals from this organization. They were explaining to us yesterday, they have 400 clients on their caseload, 200 of them are suitable for therapy. At least 30 or 40 of them at the moment are individuals who can only be seen by a Farsi speaking or Cantonese speaking individual, and the other 160 are still very much eligible for us to see them as well. By negotiating, by contacting, by taking that step to see what the potential and the opportunities are, which again is this leadership and all this sort of stuff I keep banging on about, we've managed to create this situation. This is what I was saying earlier, the opportunities, and any of the opportunities I have, or a position I've sort of created, we've created for ourselves. And this is one where, yes, someone contacted us first, but this opportunity wasn't there. It was never on the cards. We created it. We created it because we asked a question and we developed a situation, and we continued to communicate. We continued to be respectful. We continue to know, okay, they must be really busy as well. We'll give them some space. We'll negotiate. We'll put forward our skills. We'll let them know what we're about and what we can do. And they loved it. They love that stuff. People in this country love it. They can't get enough of it. If you speak another language, they love it. It's easy for us, if we're from minority ethnic backgrounds, to think, well, what's so special about speaking Farsi or Cantonese or Urdu or whatever, because everyone in my family speaks it. It's rare here. It's rare. It's knowing your value, what skills you have. These guys, we contacted them yesterday. Kenny and I met before it, and we went for half an hour, we had this discussion, okay, how are we going to sell ourselves? How are we going to get these guys sucked in? As soon as we went on the call, the person was, oh God, we're so grateful that you guys contacted us. The tables have now turned, people. It's not us trying to sell us to them, it's them. They wanted to sell themselves to us because they saw the value of an Iranian clinical psychologist, and the bloody few of us out there, and a Cantonese speaking Chinese clinical psychologist. There are not many of them out there. And my regret, I told Kenny, my regret was that, you know, we should have charged far more. We should have been saying that we charge far more. That's my regret again. I don't believe I do believe in regret. This is it. You live and you learn. We undervalued ourselves, even in this negotiation, even in a position where we're stepping out and we're forcing something almost. We're trying to sell ourselves. We undervalued ourselves. We're worth far more. Is what we've learned from this. But we created this situation, and now we potentially have this huge source of referral. It's in the industry, in the area that we love, and it's going to keep us very, very busy. And Kenny, I'll bring you in. But the really important thing to add as well is, by the way, we have lots of these ideas and projects and things that are going on, and there's lots of them that we're still working on that are at different stages. Some of them may fall absolutely flat on their faces, but we're doing it. And this is part of that. We've got all these projects. This one has worked, or it looks like it's going to work. The others may not work at all. It doesn't matter. You only need the one. So it's not just about the success, it's also about the failures. If we let those other failures deter us, we would never have asked this question here, but we didn't. And that's what sort of leadership is kind of about, and that's what knowing your value is about. As people from diverse communities, it's about knowing to appreciate that, appreciating yourself, and knowing your value in a field where many of us look at it and think it's a deterrent, it's a problem that there aren't lots of people from minority ethnic backgrounds in the profession. Actually, it's not. Actually, it's an advantage that there aren't, because it means that we're potentially worth more if we're from a diverse community. So lovely. I'm conscious of the time. Kenny's with us. Andreas, I promised you that we would go over our allotted time.
Yes.
We've delivered on that. You can't accuse us of liars. Do we have time for? I'm happy to stay for questions if people would like to.
Yes. I mean, I have a million questions, but I think that if anyone, dear wonderful students, has a question on anything. I think last time we were there, a lot of people were like, oh, can you, oh yes, Marvin, do you just want to switch yourself? Or can we, can I just stop sharing the screen? And then I think we can just basically kind of, see Marvin. I don't know if she's like.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, fantastic.
I just had a quick question. So in terms of like, I'm going to say white people, but I hope that doesn't really like offend anyone. But would you say that white people have a bigger chance at getting, at having like better work experience and better connections? And if so, then how can we, as people from the BAME community, actually build our own networks? Because I feel like at the end of the day, everyone's going to have the degree. You know, wherever you studied or wherever you did it, everyone's going to have a psychology degree. So how can we, as people who probably don't have connections, make those connections?
Well, I'm just going to share my screen now again, because I mean, here you go.
Contact.
That sort of, we'll send it out. That's what I guess where Natasha and Kenny and I are trying to do by putting these talks together, by putting these forums together, is it's offering an opportunity for to be able to develop these connections. Because you're right, I mean, it is one of the understood issues within the profession that white British people seem to have better networks, and so they can establish these links to be able to prepare themselves for interviews and opportunities. And you don't only have to contact clinicians who are from minority ethnic background. You may find that your experience of communicating with them, particularly if you want to talk about cultural issues, might be better and richer. But that's what this is about. It's about trying to find the people who are having these discussions, and there's more and more of us in the profession who are facilitating these groups and these talks. We are out there, so look for us, Google it, go on LinkedIn, do all of these things that you young people do now with technology. I don't know about this nonsense. Kenny forced me to go on LinkedIn a few months ago, and that's my one venture into social media. And that is it. Social
okay,
media?
Andreas forced me.
Sorry, could you say that again?
I just said Andreas forced me to go onto LinkedIn. I never used to have it before.
Hey, well done. No.
If it's okay,
Oh,
can you
LinkedIn
put
is for
that
old people.
website in?
Sorry, Marian, go ahead, please.
I was just going to say, can you put the what you had up on your screen, please?
I will share
Or if you want to put it into the chat. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I will. I mean, Mazza shared the slides with me. I will share them with you guys. I also know that last week we have Amanda, who I think she's Black British. She has an African background, and they do. If you follow her on LinkedIn, you can see they do a lot of kind of networking events. I think especially for people from, who are Black British. And I think there's like a lot going on. I think a lot of you guys realize we have an opportunity. We are kind of have the foot in the door and are trying to kind of help. So I think, yes, Shaima asked, are you mentoring students? So if students contact you guys, I mean, after everything you said, they just have to be bold and contact you. Yes. So please do, Shaima, and ask. Yes. So I think, Natasha, you said it very much in the beginning, and maybe you could say a little bit more about that kind of picking up. It's like finding a mentor, right? I think, I mean, maybe not just one. I always feel like they're different, right? It's like how do you do that? Like, yeah, what's the person? I don't know. Like, I mean, I always say, like, if you don't like the person, don't work. Like, don't, I think that's for me always like, I only want to network with people I like. But it's like, maybe, Natasha, can you tell us a little bit more? How did you do it? And you came from Canada to the UK, right? So you basically had no network. When you came, I mean, you all came over at some point. Sorry, yeah, I just, Natasha.
Yeah, Andrea. So in terms of my experience, it's mainly in Canada. I just applied straight from Canada. I know some of the people who have studied in the UK, and they're international students in the UK where they're completing their undergrad and then they're applying to the doctorate program while being in the UK. But I moved here in 2019, September, right before the pandemic hit. So all my experience is mainly in Canada. And in terms of mentor, I think it's important to kind of just get to know what their research is, and if that's something that you like, is that your area of interest in the future that you want to kind of expand on, and maybe attending their talks if they're doing any kind of webinars, getting to know their work, and then starting off with just engaging in terms of contacting them, like Mazda said earlier, and building and trying to network with them. And yeah, they might not reach out to you for the first time and second time, but I think being consistent and persistent with what you want, and just reaching out to them again and again, and really getting to know their work rather than just saying, hey, I'm interested in this, but also showing them what kind of skills and value do you bring in, and working on those projects collaboratively with them, rather than just saying that, oh, I'm here, I'm interested in this.
Yes, I couldn't agree. I mean, I get a lot of emails from people say, hey, I love your research and then you can see copy and paste social psychology. Can you like help me or something like that? Like, if you're not even bothering to read any of my stuff, or it doesn't seem like you're really interested, I'm also not really interested. So yes, I think the email, you're right, that shows that you're passionate and you actually care and you're thinking about how you can help that person. I think it's really important, not just like, okay, so that's like really resonates with me. That's advice I always give to kind of like not just writing like, hey, help me. It's like, yeah, okay, great. All right, yes. Anything to add, Matsuo, Kenny?
Kenny, do you want to add anything?
Hello. Yeah. Well, I think it's hard. It's hard to find a mentor when I don't grow up here, and when I go back home, it's the same group of people. I don't have family here. I do have cousins who friends of friends who work in certain services. And in my experience during training, I noticed that very often when I was running a research study, like we were looking for some young people to help me out with the studies, and very often I've got friends of friends from the researcher who contact us, and they're usually white people. And that's an example of how kind of systemically how minority people might have lesser, kind of fewer chance to get access to opportunities. I think there's kind of definitely certain sense of reality there, meaning that there is much harder to be supported and to be mentored, and therefore recognizing that reality means that we might have to do something a bit more and differently, and to an extent we don't feel quite comfortable, and in order to get what is not kind of just freely handed to us. I would say it's hard, and also I would say it's hard to find a mentor, but it's always good to start asking the question like what you did right now, because that makes me thinking, and suddenly I will be thinking, to have the capacity, how will I do that? And that triggers me instantly to think about, to use some energy and time to think about how to make this work. So I think simply just asking would already be really good. But of course, there are times when you send emails to people and it's around 7 or 8, and they're dealing with other things, and they might feel less motivated to answer it, or after a few hours they forgot about it. That could happen, certainly. I just want to say from another perspective, now being the person who sometimes people ask me to mentor them, and to recognize that is also important. And once again, in order to get this working and make this happen, you have to try it again and again, and ask politely and state clearly about what you can contribute. And it's a skill that you can learn and carry forward, and that will lead you to lots of unexpected adventures. And that is also something, even though Master and I running a clinic together, I also really want to emphasize how important to find a partner and find a group of people that you truly trust and you can be vulnerable to, so you can learn from each other. And sometimes you could be a leader, like I could lead the digital aspect in a clinic and automate the things. But they're also, I'm willing to be led by Master in situation when we are negotiating with other people. So finding the right group of people that gives you a space to show your leadership, and also to be willing to be led. Sometimes this could also open up more opportunities for you to be mentored and access other social networks. Yeah, so there are also other dimensions for you to think of.
All right, great. Any other questions from our students that you would like to know? I think it doesn't seem like it. Yeah, I think the only thing I was wondering, and not wondering, want to add to that kind of like, I think it's also good if you write me an email, if you write somebody, to have some specific request. If it's like, hey, rather than, hey, I want to know more about X or something like that. And I feel like, oh, that sounds like 54 emails back and forth. I just better not answer. But if you say, hey, Andreas, I know you're busy, but here's my personal statement. Can you just look at paragraph 2? I'm really, then I just, yes, I know, I'd like love it. But I think that's also something, right? It's something specific, a request or an ask where it's not just, hey, I think that's important too. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what we were talking about earlier as well, isn't it? Being specific and knowing what it is you want to achieve from that. So when you're asking, do you mentor students, what do you mean by mentor? Do you want someone who you can just contact every now and again to ask questions? Do you want someone who can look through your applications? Are you looking for a job? What mentoring in what sort of capacity and in what way? The more specific you can be with your communications, the more directed other individuals can be regarding their response to you.
Yeah, that's great advice. Okay, I think I would kind of, because I'm mindful of the time, and I think I want to lure enough students in to watch this recording. If the recording is 1.5 hours, they're just like, oh my God, I can't. I rather watch Netflix, but this is so much better than Netflix. Thank you so much and I would just stop the recording. And then if anyone has anything they want to ask me or our 3 panel speakers, please do so after the recording stops.